Hi, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. What I'm about to share is deeply personal, painful and difficult to talk about, but as the police hate women, especially female victims of sexual violence, and only aim to help cover up the crimes of perpetrators, I feel I have no choice but to speak up. This is just a small snapshot of my story about how I was betrayed, targeted and harmed by people I once trusted in both my personal and professional life. In December 2021, I was introduced to a woman by the name of Vanessa Gondar, regrettably, by my then boyfriend William Cox. She is the sister-in-law of his older brother James Cox. She is also a personal acquaintance of Camilla Kerslake. The second evening I met her, in December 2021, she expressed interest in recommending Chris Robshaw and Camilla Kerslake to me as potential clients to discuss fine wine investment while I was a portfolio manager at Vin-X Ltd. I agreed in good faith and thanked her for the potential client referral. But what happened much later showed me that her intentions were not what they seemed. The following year, in 2022, Chris Robshaw was brought into Vin-X as a director, despite having no relevant commercial experience, while I was still sidelined for a promotion that was well overdue and deserved on the basis of my proven ability and experience. Camilla Kerslake had taken the positive affirmations and recommendations I had made about Vin-X to Vanessa and used this to encourage Chris to approach the company independently, completely bypassing me and deliberately circumventing me. It's clear from her previous behaviour in harassing Gary Barlow for a record deal that she only knows how to elbow her way into places she would normally never belong or be invited to. As we know, the record deal in her so-called career as a singer quickly flopped due to a lack of talent, experience and commercial viability. I believe that, along with Camilla Kerslake and Chris Robshaw, Vanessa Gondar, my ex-boyfriend William Cox and his brother James Cox were all involved in a conspiracy to have me drugged and raped by Joe Arnold. I believe this was driven by unresolved trauma within their extended family. William Cox and James Cox were both sexually abused as young children by a Sri Lankan neighbour. Their mother, Tina Cox, regularly left them in this man's care while she drank Pinot Grigio with other neglectful mothers. The Sri Lankan neighbour raped them repeatedly, made child sexual abuse material and distributed it online. He was eventually arrested, served 2 years in prison and was deported back to Sri Lanka. Will and James never resolved their trauma. I believe that the deep level of shame they carry, combined with resentment towards me after finally ending a relationship with Will that made me utterly miserable, was the emotional motive for what followed. Camilla Kerslake's unofficial entry into the company, the professional sabotage, the manipulation and ultimately the drugging and rape I was subjected to by Joe Arnold, none of it was accidental. I believe it was all orchestrated. I understand exactly how serious these statements are. I would not be making them unless I believed them to be true, based on my lived experience, the pattern of behaviour I witnessed, and the harm I endured. I am currently seeking justice through formal legal processes, including an employment tribunal and police action. So far, I have been ignored, disbelieved, and let down by the very systems meant to protect people in my position. That's why I'm speaking out here. What happened to me wasn't just unethical and malicious, it was criminal, and I won't be silenced. If you've gone through something similar, or if you've ever been gaslit, manipulated, or punished for telling the truth, I want you to know you're not alone. And to those who were involved, you know what you did, and so do I. One final thing I'd like to say before I analyse the video is that Camilla Kerslake especially makes several direct and indirect references to conversations we had the night I was raped, echoing things I said and even using the same language I used to describe certain experiences. I'm not claiming to own language, but when someone copies your words, your tone and your insights deliberately, especially as a form of antagonism or psychological provocation, it's not innocent, it's targeted, and it's not fair. The day after this interview was published, before I'd even seen it or knew it existed, my colleagues were laughing about it on our morning call and asking if I had watched it. Later that day, the man who raped me, Joe Arnold, called me on my personal mobile and told me directly to watch it. It's worth adding that he had been promoted to manage me just weeks after he raped me. I told him I wasn't interested in either of them, Camilla and Chris, and didn't need to watch it. But later I did watch it privately, and what I saw left me deeply disappointed. The way they targeted me and their total lack of professionalism was devastating and had a profound impact on me and my ability to carry out my role. Before I finally get to the actual interview, I just want to say that I've spent enough time typing up a transcript, going through the video multiple times, which has been beyond unpleasant, and I just want to get this over with. I'm going to try and finish it and post it in one go because I'm exhausted, and there are still plenty more interviews where this comes from. If I mispronounce something or have to repeat a sentence, that's why. I refuse to go back to the beginning and do it again. It's taken too much of a toll on me.
Joining us on today's Performance People are a record-breaking England rugby captain and one of the world's leading classical singers.
Chris Robshaw led his country more times than any other player in the professional era, winning a Six Nations Grand Slam along the way.
Joining Chris is his wife, the Brits-nominated Camilla Kerslake, and England's best-selling soprano.
Despite the claims made in this interview, it is misleading to describe Camilla Kerslake as England's best-selling soprano. In reality, her debut album, while supported by Gary Barlow, achieved moderate success and did not reach the commercial heights implied. Public records and industry data suggest it sold fewer than 30,000 copies. For comparison, Sarah Brightman remains England's best-selling soprano, with over 30 million records sold worldwide and an internationally recognised career that spans decades. Statements like these are not only factually inaccurate, but they also reflect the kind of exaggerated self-promotion that undermines the credibility of those making them.
These two performance people know a thing or two about executing under the spotlight.
So I always say the World Cup is the highest and lowest point of my international career. And Camilla arranged for me and my best friends to go to a house in the New Forest, turn our phones off, no TVs, and we ate and drank until we couldn't remember.
They really squeeze it out of you, in the music industry. And I had to write a formal letter of complaint to have a day off. I definitely sort of got to my mid-20s and I was like, well, this is shit. I'm not enjoying my life that's meant to be a fairy tale. This needs to stop.
Let's start with this. We've all just sat down having put the children to bed, respective children, your child and our child. Our other child we've actually got with
siphoned off to your mother.
Yeah, we siphoned off to her Gigi this evening. But the younger one, who's 2, is in the house and upstairs. So I bet, like you've got somewhere around a baby monitor waiting to sound off. But if it was in our house, what now happens is we'd sort of take a moment to go, oh, wonderful, right? We've got some time, adult grown-up time. And we'd probably think about what we're going to watch on Netflix. And go and sit down and watch that. And within 10 minutes, Ben would be wonderful, right? We've got some time, adult grown-up time. And we'd probably think about what we're going to watch on Netflix and go and sit down and watch that. And within 10 minutes...
It's difficult not to notice that during parts of the interview, Camilla Kerslake appears physically agitated, with noticeable jaw tension and facial movements that some might associate with substance use, such as cocaine, colloquially known as gurning. Of course, I can't say for certain what the cause is, but the visual impression is striking and frankly concerning, especially as I believe cocaine was one of the drugs my drinks were spiked with the night I was raped, which Camilla Kerslake then filmed and posted online. One of the most alarming aspects of my experience at Vin-X was the company's apparent tolerance and even enabling of criminal behaviour among its staff, creating a dangerous environment that allowed predatory actions to go unchecked. I'll just add some extra context here. Joe Arnold, the man who sexually assaulted me, was reportedly dealing drugs openly on the sales floor at Vin-X and was a prolific cocaine dealer in the Horsham, West Sussex area. He had previously groomed a young man by the name of Spencer, who is currently serving prison time for possession and supplying cocaine at the behest of my rapist, Joe Arnold. Despite this, Vin-X took no disciplinary action against Joe. This suggests either a shocking lack of oversight or a deliberate choice to ignore serious misconduct, or likely both. The directors at Vin-X also promoted Joe Arnold to sales manager just weeks after he raped me, also despite me having far greater qualifications than him and every other member of the sales team. Joe Arnold did not finish secondary school, has no GCSEs, and has a history of violent misconduct at work, even prior to raping me and prior to working at Vin-X, which the directors of Vin-X were aware of. The case of former Vin-X broker Elliot Flack highlights troubling double standards. Flack was previously fired for cocaine possession on the sales floor, a clear breach of company policy and law. Yet he was later rehired and even promoted ahead of me, despite my clean record, proven competence, and the fact that I had trained him when he returned to Vin-X. This decision raises further questions about favouritism and the company's priorities. More recently, there are allegations that former rugby player and England captain Chris Robshaw and his wife Camilla Kerslake were arrested for drug trafficking at Gatwick Airport after returning from a trip to Egypt sponsored by Karma Karnak. While these reports remain unconfirmed, they add to the growing picture of a company leadership enmeshed in illicit activities. The disturbing culture at Vin-X appears to extend beyond the office walls into a wider network of figures linked to criminal activity, perceived power and public image. Matt Haycox, a self-styled entrepreneur and alleged father of Camilla Kerslake's second son, Hunter, is reportedly under investigation for cocaine trafficking operations between Dubai and the UK, as well as for serious fraudulent activity. While details are still emerging, the potential scale and international reach of such activity is deeply concerning. James Shakeshaft, now self-appointed CEO of Vin-X, only by way of nepotism, hired Haycox as a business mentor and only fired him when I exposed Haycox for raping his own teenage daughter. This only highlights my credibility within the company long after I had left and the credibility of the accusations. There are also serious allegations that Haycox, along with Camilla Kerslake and Chris Robshaw, may be using their registered charity, the Kerslake-Robshaw Foundation, as a vehicle for money laundering and funneling drug money into the UK. If true, this would represent a grave abuse of public trust, exploiting the appearance of philanthropy to conceal illicit activity. Together, these examples paint a disturbing picture: a workplace where illegal behaviour is tolerated, overlooked and even encouraged, where victims are marginalised and attacked, and where people like me, dedicated and qualified, are at best passed over or pushed out.
It's better be asleep. And I'd be getting grumpy because
That's
he's fallen
harsh.
asleep. And I'd finish the rest of that episode on my own. And then we'd both go to bed, having not spoken about anything really, and just sort of made our way through the day, survived.
You might have had something to eat before going to sleep.
Well, maybe. Missed that bit. So what does a typical evening look like in the Kerslake-Robshaw household?
Not dissimilar.
That's exactly what I said to her verbatim when she asked me that same question the night I was raped. At the time, she was saying how unglamorous her life had become after having a baby, how she and Robshaw just sat around watching Netflix in the evenings. I didn't want to open up, so I gave a vague, polite answer, not dissimilar. Now she's repeating it like it's her own line, but it's not. She's copying me directly. Not just echoing a relatable sentiment or controlling her image, she's recycling my words the night she filmed me being raped while I was mostly unconscious. It's a small detail, but entirely relevant.
I mean, yeah, very similar, to be honest.
Not even at all. I thought when he retired that I would get a bit more Chris time in the evenings. And I do, like, somewhat, in that he's not asleep by 7:30 every night. But I actually, the last few nights you've been out by our son's going through one of those developmental leaps. So he would usually wake up at about sort of 6:37, which is like a luxury and a lion. But recently he's been waking up at like 5, 5:30, and it's just.
She said these exact phrases to me. This entire interview is completely recycled from the night I was drugged and raped.
We are being drained. And at the same time, I know that we're really lucky because he's an excellent sleeper, but it just really highlights how important it is. But also we eat really early because we like to eat with him. Because I don't know about you guys, but if we don't eat dinner with him, he just eats snacks.
This is another reference to what I said. I said I usually finish work between 6 and 7, so usually I'll have a bigger lunch and just snack in the evening because I'm not usually that hungry.
Doesn't want actual food.
No, that'll change. You'll move on from that.
Oh, will it? Oh, good. Oh.
But again, yeah, for whatever reason, we just fall asleep on the sofa. You get Netflix on, and when you've got to kind of be home with your child, you can't really go out too far anyway. And look, being sports people and musicians, we weren't really big ravers anyway, as you could probably imagine.
So she's openly admitting to her past party lifestyle, and let's be honest, when someone says they were a big raver, it's rarely just about music. It's often a thinly veiled reference to regular drug use. In this context, it comes up as a light, almost nostalgic confession. But let's be clear, this isn't just about youthful rebellion or harmless fun. Given the wider picture, the open drug use at Vin-X, the allegations involving Gatwick Airport, and the links to Matt Haycox and Joe Arnold, this isn't some quirky detail. It fits into a much bigger, much darker, druggier picture. She's not just saying she liked loud music, she's indirectly acknowledging her involvement in the party and drug scene, a scene that's actively shaped the power dynamics and protection rackets within this circle. And yet, that history is dismissed or romanticised, while people like me, who worked hard and kept to ourselves, were gaslit, sidelined, and worse. Earlier in the evening of the night I was raped by Joe Arnold, in front of Camilla and Chris and some of my colleagues, he falsely accused me of taking drugs, specifically of smoking weed. I said I didn't know what he was talking about, but he kept pushing the accusation. It was unprofessional and humiliating, deliberately meant to publicly undermine me, as Peter did later that evening, Peter Shakeshaft. Eventually, just to end the moment, I said, maybe at uni. That throwaway comment became part of a smear campaign to discredit me. I was pushed further on my response, to which I added, at 19 or 20, doing a fine art degree, it's pretty difficult to avoid smoking the occasional joint. So when I hear Camilla now casually calling herself a big raver, I don't just hear a personal anecdote. I hear a veiled dig, a coded reference to Joe's bullying, to the false accusations made the night of my assault, and to the wider effort to cast me as unstable or unreliable. Camilla was clearly on his side. I suppose she would be. After all, she's the one who colluded against me and filmed me being raped.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to be earlier bedtime.
On the subject of sleep, right, both of you must...
She's being performative here because she knows she's just embarrassed her husband and she just cannot help herself.
Both of you, Chris, you definitely will have needed it in the past, right? An athlete needs it more than any other human being, I think, on the planet. But Camilla, you'll need it too for your voice and recovery and all those things that come into play where that's in regard. How important, I mean, now that you don't have as much as you once did of sleep, how much do you now appreciate a good night's sleep? Because for me, with young children, and I don't think I've had a proper night's sleep for the last 8 years, I mean, with young children, you really do remember those days with sort of rose-tinted but fond spectacles about what sleep really did used to look like.
Yeah, I think so. And I think
Georgie directed this question to Camilla, and she's not even paying attention. She's just gurning, excessively blinking, and eye-rolling.
When I played as well, I was very, very diligent with it as well. I would always want kind of 8 to 10 hours a night. I'd want to be in bed at 10 o'clock, and obviously, depending on when we got up, 6:30, 7-ish. I'd want that sleep. And you think it's kind of, and if you didn't sleep the whole way through, you'd be a bit grumpy and all that kind of stuff. And now, like you said, you take what you can. And it doesn't really bother you if your kid's up at 5, you just get up and get on with it. Whereas when I played, I would have kind of thrown my toys out and all that kind of stuff. But now you just have to deal with things, I think. And I was in a different position because a lot of my teammates had kids when they played. And I could never quite understand, obviously, I know Ben's still sailing, and how hard that would be to wake up kind of numerous times throughout the night, and then go play a game or go to training, because you'd always see those guys who came into training with kind of the deep kind of bags under their eyes and just sitting in the corner quietly trying to have a nap on the sofa. But yeah, it was a different world.
It's interesting though. There's a really famous soprano called Louise Alder. She's singing at Glyndebourne right now, and I don't know how old her child is, but definitely sort of not over 6 months. And she said her husband, I think, is a very famous conductor, so they're apart a lot. And she was solo parenting for that day. And she said she woke up 4 times during the night, but she sang her best version of that role she's ever done in her life.
Wow.
So I remember someone said to me, our publicist actually, he has 3 children, and I remember talking to him about it before we'd had a child. And I was like, what? How do you survive with 3 children? Like, they must be, draining you of your energy and everything all the time. And he looked at me, happy but exhausted, and went, you just sort of adapt. And I think that's the best way.
Now she's referencing this man who's actually more of a fictional character based on a conversation she had with me. And on the surface, it sounds innocent, but I know exactly what she's doing. She's making a veiled reference to me, specifically to a conversation we had the night we met, when she was talking about expanding her family. She asked me about my own family, and I told her I was one of 3 children. When she said that she thought 3 children was too many for her, and asked how my parents coped with it, I said, I think they just adapted to it. And here she is now, paraphrasing me with faux sympathy in an attempt to be relatable, and wrapping it in this quirky anecdote about a character that doesn't exist. It's not random, it's performance built out of fragments of my life and our conversations, something personal to me, repackaged into a joke or a reference point for her own narrative, meant as a veiled attack towards me. This isn't the first time or last time she's echoed my words. It's part of a pattern, using what I told her in confidence or in passing as material for her public persona. At best, it's appropriation. At worst, it's targeted, a quiet way of signalling power, of mocking me, or reinforcing the control she and Joe were trying to exert over my reality.
I've ever heard it put, you just adapt because there's no alternative.
Yeah, I definitely can't claim to be the expert in our household on this.
Well, no, you are the expert at sleeping. That is definitely true.
On sleeping, but it's true though, isn't it? If you've had a really tough night, you haven't had much sleep, you just have to go into auto really, and maybe in some ways that does.
Do you know what? Maybe what you
not
also
thinking
do
about it too much.
Exactly, you prioritize the most important things in your day that you need to then get done because you know there's only so much in the tank.
I also think with stuff like hangovers as well. When you're hungover now with a child, you just have to deal with it. Whereas before children, you would spend all day on the sofa, get a pizza, feel horrible, whatever.
That is almost word for word what he said to me when I told him I didn't want children. I remember it clearly. I said I wasn't sure about having kids, and his response was basically, fair enough, I sometimes just want to get a pizza and lie around hungover. Like that was the alternative, and insinuating that's how I lived my life, which for the record, I don't. So hearing him say this here again, in this context, public, light-hearted, rehearsed, it's jarring. It's not just a random story, it's another recycled moment from a private conversation, one that was minimising and dismissive at the time, and now turned into content. It's part of this broader pattern, where personal things I said or shared were echoed back later, but stripped of context and repurposed to serve their narrative, and to diminish me.
But now you just have to... You have to get on with things, don't you?
Straight up and out. But I used
and you
to
feel better, I think.
I used to be. I think one of the reasons we have stood the test of time, as it were, is because we're both so career focused, and both of our careers are such high pressure. You know, if I was doing the NFL or something, for example, I mean, one time they told me.
And now Camilla's making this reference to the NFL. This was lifted almost directly from a conversation, actually more of a monologue she had with me early on. She was trying to convince me that she was a really famous singer, name-dropping the NFL like it was common knowledge, and told me, I'm the most requested singer for the NFL. I remember standing there, awkward, thinking about all the actual major artists I'd seen perform at halftime shows on YouTube. I said something polite like, I'm sorry, I don't really follow the NFL, which was true in reference to the actual sport, but also my way of gently distancing myself from the self-promotion she was laying on so thick. It shows the same pattern, repeating interactions she had with me, reworking them as anecdotes, and using them to reinforce a crafted persona. It wasn't a conversation, it was a performance, and now here it is again, this time with an online audience.
Between the UK and America, it was watched by something like 17 million people, and you know, they always get you to sing that national anthem like a cappella, so it's literally just you with nothing. And especially the American one, they're all silent. They don't sing along, so it's literally just you. There's no background noise, there's no nothing. And I remember when I used to do that job, I would live so clean for, you know, there's normally, 4 games, and a couple of times I've done all of them.
Yeah.
So just all of October, I wouldn't go out, I wouldn't do anything. I'd sleep so well, I wouldn't eat anything that would give me acid reflux. And like... The first time I did the baseball, my son was, I think, 5 weeks old. I was still breastfeeding, like my support muscles were in no shape to be singing in front of that many people. But we just got up and I got on with it. And you know what? It wasn't my best performance, but it was fine. And it's just completely changed.
The night Joe raped me, he was deliberately provoking me, trying to make me jealous by goading me over Camilla being a singer. I used to sing in the office, not seriously, just along with the radio or the odd lyric between calls. And once, when Joe and others complimented my singing voice, I told Joe I had singing lessons and went to choir and always wanted to be a singer when I grew up. So the idea that Camilla was some tremendous famous singer was part of the goading, and of Joe deliberately attempting to antagonise me, which I wasn't falling for because I didn't and still do not recognise her as a singer. When it got too much, I went up to my room and looked up Camilla's work on YouTube, because honestly, I still didn't know who she was at this point. I found some videos, including one of her performing at the NFL halftime show. Later, when Joe was still pushing and goading me over this woman's failed singing career as if I would be threatened, I said, have you actually heard her sing? I showed him the clip privately. At that point, I believed we were at least friends, or at least that I had some credibility with him as a trusted colleague. I told him, in response to one of her videos, that is a dangerously wide vibrato. It was my way of asserting myself, of staking a claim to professional and musical credibility, as he was trying to undermine and bully me. For the record, Camilla's singing ability or lack thereof is no threat to me. She seems fine with being mediocre. She's even making excuses for it. That's just one of the many reasons she is not successful.
My mindset, I feel like before I was a bit precious and a bit spoiled. And I think we were all...
This is her way of calling me precious and spoiled, which isn't the case. I didn't push my way into an industry I had no prior experience in or understanding of, force Gary Barlow or anyone else into giving me a job, then when it didn't work out, marry some dude who is likely gay out of desperation, financial security, and to siphon some of his fame and status because I couldn't make it on my own. That's her strategy. Stay being a beard, Camilla. It's clearly all you're good for.
Almost spoiled by each other because I gave him so much leeway to be like a cranky bastard in bed by 9. Can you imagine being 22 and being in bed at 9:45 every single night because your boyfriend that you'd been only seeing for a couple of months would get all cross if he didn't get like 10 hours sleep?
No one forced you to be with him. He was bringing home more money than you could ever hope to, and that's the only reason you were with him. If you didn't like early nights and didn't respect the fact he needed a reasonable amount of sleep to play professional sport, you could have found a fellow raver or another closeted gay man.
But yeah, so I think we were both like enabled each other's fussiness, as it were, and now there's just, we just can't do it. So like, obviously we still help each other out where we can, but I think we've just grown up a bit, haven't we?
I can confirm that you have never grown up. You lack everything, including maturity.
But Chris, with regards to Camilla's voice, is it like having to share your other half with then another thing as well, which is this voice? Because that must need so much of its own sort of attention, feeding, sort of treating it in a particular way, training it, massaging it, making sure that it's as brilliant as it possibly can be. I mean, what do you sacrifice in a partnership to actually have to be, or for Camilla to be able to do what she does for a career?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because when you speak to sports people and you say kind of the day before a game or whatever, you would never go out for a run or be on your feet or something like that all day. When you say in terms of singing and music that you train a couple of hours a day, you, like you said, you do kind of osteo stuff, your voice, your neck, your jawline and stuff like that, and the kind of night before stuff, you would never go.
And it's still making no difference to her ability or lack thereof. Even she knows he's making it all up.
Go to a big dinner in town where there's loud music and you have to shout and all that kind of stuff because you put extra strain in your voice. And it's when you think about all this stuff, it makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. But until you, like I said, go out with a singer and understand their rituals and their habits and their training methods, it was just getting used to it because like you guys said, I'd been through so many different training regimes and all that stuff. So I knew a lot about my body. And it was just doing it in a different area, but with the same amount of respect.
Yeah, how insane a practice regime do you have, Camilla?
Well, sometimes it can be quite tough. At the moment, I'm singing Peter Grimes at the English National Opera. So we've just started production rehearsals, which is when you sort of take the music off the page and onto stage. And
there's a photo of Camilla on Instagram that she posted to her own account where she was performing either Peter Grimes or A Handmaid's Tale, and she was drinking before the performance. I have it somewhere, but as most of my evidence has been withheld by police, I can't show it here. So anyway, she can't be taking it that seriously. I'm sure that's just one of the reasons no one remotely professional wants to work with her, at least not for a second time.
You can be doing a rehearsal in the morning, a rehearsal in the afternoon, and then go straight to the theatre and do the show. So, it's another thing about being precious. You just can't be precious. You have to... I genuinely believe that being an opera singer is not in any way dissimilar to being an athlete, especially at the highest level. As you go up, it gets more. I sing for at least 2 hours every day. I do a lot of yoga. I do like weights and everything else that, people do if they, want to remain a certain shape.
And here she is saying remain a certain shape. That wasn't just a throwaway comment, that was a dig, a reference very specific to a conversation we had the night I was drugged and raped. She was pressing me with more and more intrusive questions about why I didn't pursue classical singing professionally. I'd already given her a few reasons, that I wasn't into music theory, that I enjoyed being in sales and helping people, that I didn't have the financial safety net to chase it full time, unlike her, married to someone who could support her no matter what. And finally, just to end the conversation after her continued probing, I said I wouldn't feel comfortable getting on stage at this size anyway. At the time, I was about 2 stone heavier than I am now. That wasn't a dig at anyone else, including bigger performers. It was a personal truth. I wasn't ashamed to admit that I'd gained weight. It was just the reality. I gained a lot of weight during a miserable relationship, comfort eating, surviving, and I said it with acceptance, not shame. I just wanted her to stop interrogating me. Instead, she doubled down. She insisted on showing me an Instagram photo of one of her fat opera singer friends, as if to prove a point. But it didn't feel supportive, it felt mocking, like she was putting me in my place for not fitting her narrative or her aesthetic. As well as this, she also interrogated me over not having any Botox or fillers, which I found rude. My response was, I don't think I need it, and then she showed me more pictures of a different friend who'd had a lot of work done on her face, to which I responded, it's her choice, but it's not my look. Then she showed me a picture of the same woman before she had fillers, and I said, without thinking, oh, she looks really nice there. It seems from both these women's later Instagram posts that Camilla informed them of what I'd said, they've taken it personally, and joined in with attacking me online. I have all the screenshots to prove this, which further helps me prove multiple counts of collusion, extended beyond Vin-X directors and direct associates. So when I hear her talk now about remaining a certain shape, I know exactly where that's coming from. It's not a general comment, it's a coded jab, rooted in that moment, in my vulnerability and her obsession with image. And given what I know now about her role in filming my rape and the footage being posted on OnlyFans and the dark web, as well as her having made AIs of me having sex, this comment takes on an even more chilling tone. It's as though my body was always part of the control, the spectacle, the humiliation, not just in private, but in how she made it public. Nasty, vile, conniving, insecure, sorry excuse for a woman.
But on top of that, I wouldn't dream of going even for dinner. I just wouldn't go out the night before a show. I wouldn't go out 3 nights before a show if it was a big
You'll drink on the job though.
show. It's like a real engine, and it's sort of from like the groin up, and it all works. And if one tiny thing is out of sync, you're just not going to produce the best sound you can. And when you think about opera, it's quite extraordinary what you're asking your body to do. You're asking your body,
and you still fail to do it convincingly at a basic level.
Your vocal cords are the same size as the cuticle of your neck.
So I actually corrected her here. The night we met, she was talking about vocal cords, and I said many people call them cords, but the technical term is vocal folds. I explained why. I said it neutrally and only to offer some information to her which would make her sound more credible with her so-called peers. So this is a reference to that.
And you're asking vocal folds to produce a sound louder than most speakers can make, to project across a 60-piece orchestra and in Peter Grimes, for example, a 65-piece choir. That's 125
categorically untrue. That's why microphones exist.
People you have to be louder than. And it's all about direction and focus. And we have the same lung capacities as sort of swimmers and pro athletes and everything.
Now she says opera singers have the same lung capacity as swimmers. Right, that's another line that's not hers, it's mine. This comes directly from a conversation we had when she was probing me, again, about why I didn't pursue opera, after I told her I trained as a classical singer when I was younger. I remember explaining to her that I've always had a large rib cage and that swimming as a child probably helped develop my lung capacity. I literally said, I'm built like an opera singer, it's the wide rib cage and the swimming. That was a personal reflection drawn from my own childhood and training. And now here she is, lifting it and folding it into her own narrative, as though that experience, that body, that background was hers to begin with. It's more than mimicry, it's identity appropriation, taking fragments of my life and voice and using them to reinforce her image. Whether it's about singing, body type, or lung capacity, she's carefully selecting details from my past and presenting them as her own lived expertise. In isolation, it might sound flattering or coincidental, but in context, with everything else she's copied, twisted, or turned into performance, it's part of a systematic erasure of me, sustained bullying and intimidation, and a reshaping of my identity to serve her story.
And it really, I think that's why it works so well, and September is always a really busy time, and then it sort of peters off, and I can relax a bit and socialize a bit more. But I guess it's just like when you have like a big competition or something on, But then in the summer, we'd have it large and just like eat and drink and party and live our best
This is almost a direct quote of how she was describing their lives to me, not that I'd actually asked.
lives. But I think it's just, any job like ours that lots and lots of people want to do, you just have to know that there's a lot that you have to sacrifice to do it. But that I think, well, we would all agree, or we wouldn't be doing it, that it is definitely worth it.
It's not the first time in this interview she's directly compared her level of self-proclaimed expertise to that of her husband's, who is without question far more established in rugby than she has ever been in any industry. Even though I don't like him and I don't like what he's done, it's embarrassing to hear her pitch herself like this when barely anyone has ever heard of her. Unlike any recent former captain of England rugby, even Chris looks embarrassed throughout.
How long will you build up to a particular opera? How long will that preparation take?
It depends on the role. I have a particular voice type that's quite sort of meaty and large, which belies my size.
Meaty and large, please. She can barely sustain her breath when she sings. Just look at her pitiful online repertoire. That line is a dig, a jab at me, and it reeks of jealousy. I trained as a classical singer years before she ever even looked at music as something she could co-opt without any formal background. She's not built for it, vocally or physically, and she knows it. She says it belies her size, but all I hear is lies.
Really, but I also have a very, very high voice. I can sing the highest note ever written. So it's sort of...
Being able to reach a note on a scale is not the same as being able to sing it. Anyone can force out a pitch. That doesn't mean you have control, tone, or any kind of musicality. Technique matters, breath matters, expression matters. This is the difference between someone who's trained and someone who's performing the idea of being a singer.
Depends. I could spend 20 years preparing a role like, say, Tosca, which is Puccini's Tosca, because that's a huge thing. I can't tell you guys about it yet.
For a professional opera singer unfamiliar with the manuscript, the answer is 2 to 6 weeks.
Because it's not been confirmed, but there's a role I've been working on for about 2 years, which I'm hoping to premiere next year.
Classical, so.
Yeah, so I was a crossover singer, a classical crossover singer, which doesn't require much training at all. You just have to sound decent and look pretty.
Right, that's a dig, 100%. Aimed squarely at me and my time training in a private choir as a teenager. She's trying to belittle the discipline and structure I had because she never did it. She was too vain, too self-absorbed to ever be part of a choir. Group learning didn't appeal to her because she couldn't be the centre of attention. She didn't want to train, she wanted the image. Solo spotlight, no accountability. Classic narcissistic behaviour from the very beginning. It's not just a throwaway line, it's a projection and an attempt to undermine anyone who actually put in the work.
5 years ago, I decided to rigorously train operatically.
And yet to no avail. 5 years of rigorous training, and there's still no breath control, no placement, no resonance. Just empty theatrics and recycled branding, mostly from people like me, who she has repeatedly stepped on to maintain her facade. You can't fake operatic technique, no matter how much you try to persuade everyone that you are remotely skilled or talented.
Classical music, I think it's more than 90% privately educated, so I was the sort of girl from the comprehensive.
You can just feel the chip on her shoulder here. The irony, I told her clearly multiple times that I went to a normal comprehensive school, but because I was in a small audition-only choir, Voices Derby Girls Choir, run by the incredible Ms. Ann Miller, a choir she would still fail to receive an invite to audition for due to their high standards, she became fixated on the idea that I must have gone to private school. Again, I reiterated multiple times that I did not, and she wouldn't let go of the idea that I was privately trained, and that was somehow the equivalent of private education, which it is not. She literally wouldn't drop it. It was like she needed me to fit her narrative, so much so she tried to rewrite facts I'd just told her. It was surreal. She was, and still is, constantly projecting her own insecurities onto me, which she did multiple times that evening, and many multiple times through her Instagram posts and online interviews, such as this. She's convinced the reason she's not taken seriously in the classical music world is because she, like me, went to a normal comp. It's not that. It's because she's talentless and no one credible wants to work with her. Certainly not twice.
School who, lived for a few years on a council estate, who was sort of decided that, I was going to work in my 20s and save up and pay for it myself.
Firstly, she told me herself the council estate only came after her family moved back from New Zealand because they didn't have a property lined up. It wasn't some formative hardship, it was temporary housing. But she spins it now as a struggle narrative to justify her lack of skill and talent, a way to excuse the fact she never made it and never will. It's not grit, it's branding, and the rest of the story just as hollow. So, secondly, let's talk about the real timeline. She got pregnant in Preston as a teenager by an Asian man, which she carefully never mentions, and the family moved to London soon after to distance themselves from her child, Sophia, who I've found and shown in a previous video. She either voluntarily gave up the child or was pressured to in order to chase a singing career that never took off. And this idea that she paid for it all herself, come on, since meeting Robshaw, she hasn't paid for anything herself. He had the means to fund whatever vocal training she claims to have had, though frankly, if she did, it was clearly a waste of the teacher's time and of Robshaw's money. This whole self-made soprano act is just that, an act, built on revisionist history, denial and projection.
And it really is. I get like any kind of physical thing. You know, you start at, you know, you take one step, and then from there you know, if you have a talent, it's all about nurturing it and putting in all the work and all the sacrifices and thousands of hours of training. And you know, then if you're lucky and if you're good enough and if the wind's behind you, you know, you end up singing for the English National Opera at the Colosseum. You know, and that's the goal. And it's
That's a blatant lie. Her technique is amateurish at best, her breath control laughable, and her performances reveal the hollow shell of someone who's never done the hard graft real classical training demands. It's all empty boasting and hollow noise. She's never earned her place, just rides on her husband's name like a crutch, sneaking into spaces like Vin-X to sabotage someone far more talented and accomplished than she could ever dream of being in any field. Her entire act is a pathetic, desperate grab for relevance that only exposes her insecurity and lack of real substance.
Definitely, it's been a voyage of love, but I'm very, very pleased to sort of have ended up here.
Yeah, right. No one's buying it, Camilla. Least of all you. Her fake smile can't hide the doubt and contempt she really feels. She's pretending, but it's all brittle cracks and desperation underneath.
It's been an amazing voyage by all accounts. You've done brilliantly.
No, it was a really good explanation. But I want to ask you one thing. Neither of us can sing. Ben can't sing. He can't hold a note. Neither can I. But I want to ask you, if we had 10,000 hours of practice and training as per the Malcolm Gladwell School of Thought, and we had 10,000 hours in our tank, would we then be able to sing?
Okay, so could you sing?
This entire segment painfully echoes the conversations we had with Joe Arnold the very night he raped me. He asked if he could sing, and Camilla resorts to the tired Twinkle Twinkle Little Star example. I softly corrected her at the time, pointing out that singing atonally requires more training than someone who sings naturally on pitch. I said that my core belief is that if you can speak, you can sing. She later shamelessly copies me word for word. She also brings up ballet, echoing my mention of having dance training, including ballet, which I loved. I joked that I wasn't built to be a ballerina because even at my slimmest, to reach the standard weight, I'd have to lose a leg, which isn't convenient for ballet, nor is it body dysmorphia, just my natural body type. I said it to keep the mood light, but she turned it into another point of comparison, appropriating my life story to fit her narrative. Camilla also mentioned growing up in a musical household, as she had questioned me extensively about my parents and family background. I told her both my parents were teachers, my dad was a music teacher and head of expressive arts at a secondary school. She seemed deeply jealous that my dad paid for my singing lessons and that I was encouraged in my hobbies, something she clearly never had. I believe this jealousy stems from her narcissism and her parents' neglect or unwillingness to invest in her dreams. Maybe they just didn't believe she had what it took to make it as a singer, and frankly, if that's the case, they were right. This wasn't casual talk. It was a calculated mining of my memories I shared with her. Joe's mocking and goading, combined with Camilla's mimicry and appropriation, was part of a twisted power play. And remember, this was happening before Joe assaulted me, which I think makes it pretty obvious that it was orchestrated.
Sing something like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on pitch.
Well, I don't even know what pitch is because my tone and pitch is terrible.
Why don't you have a crack at it?
No, I can't bring myself to do it.
As long as you have a basic idea of pitch, So, you know, you go twinkle, twinkle, instead of like twinkle, twinkle, lit. Do you know what I mean?
No,
As long
I'm
as you have a
that.
basic
I'm the
idea of pitch
latter.
and you-
I'm the latter.
Then no. But I think lessons can.
Yeah, I don't think if I had
No,
50,000
no.
hours, I'd ever be able to sing it.
I think a bit of it is innate, a bit of it is circumstantial. So, you know, if you know, you could grow up in a really musical household, but if you don't have the structures, you know, you probably won't ever be able to do it, you know. But like a ballerina, being an opera singer, I think is probably like a ballerina. You know, they're born, and then they're made. You know, they have this natural thing that they could possibly do, and then they train until they can do it. And I think opera's the same. But I genuinely believe if you can speak, you can sing. So lessons will take you from, if you're
I can
average,
do that.
they can make
I can
you good.
speak.
If they're good, they can make you great. Well, there you go. So you would be one of the people who's average, who could maybe be good.
Joe claimed he could sing atonally, and I jokingly said, you would be one of the people who was average, who could maybe be good. Miller quotes this line verbatim as if she invented it herself, but it doesn't land the same way. I was speaking casually to a colleague I'd known and joked with for nearly 2 years. Camilla, meanwhile, is speaking to a professional, generously giving her airtime on a podcast, supposedly for people who are actually established in their fields, unlike her. She just comes across as rude and scathing, lacking the warmth or context my comment had. This is classic Camilla, appropriating my words, stripping them of nuance, and using them to try and elevate herself while tearing others down.
Well, I need to try harder is the motto.
And your dad's got some serious rhythm. So actually, you should be up there.
I don't think you're the right person to comment on whether dad's got rhythm or not. I don't know if that comes from an oracle perspective. I did read somewhere when looking up about, you know, singing and classical singing and everything that's sort of connected to it. Somebody said, I don't know if this is right or not, that the voice is let's get this right. How am I going to say it? The fact that it's connected to the body's biological clock and needs warming up the same time every day. What happens when you are in a time zone change scenario? Does travel completely cock everything up for an opera singer?
This is a brilliant, very specific question that clearly exposes Camilla's lack of deep knowledge or success as a self-styled singer. She's put on the spot with something too technical and nuanced for her to handle. It highlights how superficial her training really is compared to the rigorous demands of true classical opera professionals.
For a classically trained singer.
Do you know what? There are definitely times when I do sound better. So I think they say the best time to sing or do anything physical is around 12 p.m. But then, like when I'm exercising, I always feel like I have my best runs. For example, I can always go the furthest or the fastest at about 3 p.m. So if I was like booking an audition, I would always try and get sort of one of the sort of 11 to sort of 1-ish type slots, and no one else wants them. So it's great. I always get them.
If that were actually true, every professional singer would be fighting tooth and nail for those times. Plus, if she really always gets those auditions, why is there so little evidence of her work online? The contradiction just highlights how much of her story is forced and fake.
But the travel thing, it's more the airplane. It's more because there's no humidity. They like suck all the air out the cabin. No. So, you know, your cords need like moisture to be healthy. So you're either drinking the whole time trying to rehydrate.
Yeah, but you're not drinking water, are you, Camilla?
I have those Evian face mists, and I'm like, or
the worst is when we go on holiday somewhere hot, and Camilla hates having that AC on for her voice.
I won't have the AC.
So I'm there sweating to sleep at night.
And
then Camilla's just,
do it for love and money because it's in his best interest.
You barely make anything. You made more from your secret OnlyFans and cocaine supplying than you ever have done singing.
Be honest.
You could try a separate room.
Georgie's laughing because of the audacity.
Chris, you know, leave Camilla and the baby together.
I mean, gladly.
That's
gladly.
your ploy.
He smells like a walrus.
Embarrassing and inappropriate.
But you mentioned it before, and it's true. Like, you have a real common theme, the two of you. It's you know, it is this rigor, this discipline, this, you know, this real pursuit of greatness in your own individual areas. I mean, Chris, the sort of the routine, the regimen, all of that comes with being a professional athlete. Do you miss that bit? Do you miss not having that in your life anymore? It was such a major part of your world. Have you got that back yet in any formal way?
Yeah, I do really miss it actually. For 18 years, well, since school, my Monday was this, my Tuesday was this, my Wednesday day off, Thursday, Friday, all were exactly the same, except you might have the odd corporate dinner or charity event or appearance or something like that. But generally, that was how it went for 30 odd weeks of the year. And it changed
More than Camilla has ever worked part or full
a
time.
little bit in pre-season, but it was always kind of the same. And that, I retired now over a year ago. And that's been the biggest struggle because I bounce around a little bit. I do a little bit of TV work. I do a bit with Gallagher Insurance, a bit of a wine investment company,
To which he offers nothing.
and then some ambassadorial stuff. But it's kind of 1 week I might go to the insurance on a Monday, then I might do the wine on a Wednesday because I've got other things to work in that week as well.
50k a year from Vin-X, not pro rata, and he turns up no more than 1 day per week. When I worked there, it wasn't even that, and when he did show up, there was no real work involved for him because he's not qualified to do the job. His role was based purely on cronyism.
Whereas the following week it might be completely different. And then trying to fit in, obviously, Camilla's schedule, baby's schedule as well. It's been really hard, and I always found like myself mentally trying to work out what's going on. I have to write everything down. We've got a written calendar. I've got a Google calendar. And that for me, I think since retiring has been the hardest thing to manage.
You've never worked in a commercial environment, Chris, so that's why you can't even manage your schedule. You're useless. Stick to rugby. You do not belong anywhere near a business, and he knows it. It was all a money grab.
Let that be a warning to you.
What? Don't retire. Yeah.
Don't
But
retire. I mean, that's the other thing. Yeah, keep on going.
Yeah, but I can understand that. So that when you've got a structure and you know what you're doing day in day out, and you just got to get on to do that, and then suddenly everything's changing around a lot. That must be tough.
Well, you get freedom, don't you? But freedom can be difficult because you're not necessarily always sure what to do with it and how to prioritize it when you haven't got. I guess, Chris,
He was given a leadership position in. Might cut out.